Gunshots echo through the night. Rain hits the pavement like tiny explosions. A body crashes against the cold floor. Silence follows. Then another shot tears through the air. A man in a black suit calmly reloads while the room around him is filled with broken glass, scattered shell casings, and men who underestimated him. Someone whispers his name with fear, almost like a warning. John Wick. He does not celebrate. He does not shout. His breathing is steady, controlled. His movements are precise. Because what the world is witnessing is not chaos. It is habit. The terrifying truth about John Wick is that nothing he does is accidental. Every movement, every decision, every reaction has been trained into his body through repetition, discipline, and psychological control. The world sees the violence, but the real story is hidden in the habits that made him unstoppable. Long before the underworld feared him, John Wick was simply a man shaped by pressure and survival. Born as Jardani Jovanovic, he entered a brutal criminal world at a young age where weakness could mean death. In that environment, emotions were not luxuries, they were threats. Assassins survived by separating their feelings from their actions, creating a psychological wall between the man and the mission. That habit of emotional compartmentalization became the foundation of his power. He learned to move through fear without showing it, to experience anger without losing control, and to execute decisions without hesitation. Psychologists studying the character often describe this balance through the classic theory of the human mind: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the raw force of emotion, the anger and revenge burning inside him. The ego is the strategist, calculating every move with cold logic. The superego is the personal code that keeps even a killer disciplined within his own moral boundaries. Inside John Wick, those three forces constantly fight for control, and that internal war is what gives him such terrifying precision. Yet even a man like Wick once wanted something ordinary. For the first time in his violent life, he tried to escape the darkness. After completing an impossible task for the Tarasov crime family, eliminating their rivals and securing their empire in a single devastating operation, he was finally allowed to leave the assassin world behind. He did not retire because he was tired. He retired because he had found love. Helen changed him. She gave him something he had never experienced before: peace. For a brief moment, the man known for death lived quietly, away from guns and bloodshed, believing he had finally outrun his past. But life has a cruel habit of testing people when they are most vulnerable. Discipline had always been the core of his identity. Everything about John Wick was built on repetition and relentless training. The fighting style associated with him, often described as a blend of close-quarters combat and tactical gunplay, reflects the philosophy that mastery comes from drilling the same actions until the body responds without thought. Hours of practice, endless rehearsals, constant conditioning, every movement refined until instinct replaces hesitation. The habit of repetition is what separates amateurs from professionals. In Wick's world, hesitation means death. Only discipline creates survival. Another invisible habit that defines him is awareness. Wick constantly scans his environment, reading every room like a chessboard before the game even begins. Where are the exits? Where could danger appear? What objects could become weapons if needed? Elite fighters and operatives train their minds to process these questions automatically, turning observation into instinct. This is why Wick rarely appears surprised. His brain has already mapped the battlefield before the first shot is fired. His lifestyle also reflects another powerful principle: simplicity. Wick owns very little. His wardrobe is minimal. His home is quiet and uncluttered. High performers often remove unnecessary distractions so that every ounce of mental energy can focus on the mission that matters most. Simplicity sharpens the mind. It clears the noise. It allows purpose to stand alone without competition. Silence is another one of his defining habits. John Wick is not a man who wastes words. He speaks rarely, and when he does, every sentence carries weight. Silence forces others to reveal themselves while he remains unreadable. In a world full of loud threats and empty promises, the quiet man becomes the most dangerous presence in the room. But perhaps the most terrifying habit of all is endurance. Wick continues moving even when his body is breaking. Gunshot wounds, broken bones, exhaustion, none of it seems to slow him for long. Pain becomes background noise. His focus remains fixed on the objective. That level of endurance is not superhuman. It is trained. Athletes, soldiers, and fighters learn to push their limits gradually, expanding their capacity to function under extreme stress. Wick represents the extreme end of that discipline, where resilience becomes identity. The defining moment that reawakened the legend arrived on a quiet night when a group of criminals invaded his home. They stole his car and killed the puppy Helen had left behind. To the outside world, the reaction seemed absurd. Starting a war over a dog sounded ridiculous, but the puppy was not just a pet. It was the final piece of the life Helen had tried to build for him. It was the last symbol of hope she had left behind. When that symbol was destroyed, the fragile piece inside Wick collapsed completely. The monster returned. Once that decision was made, there was no hesitation. John Wick moved with the unstoppable commitment that defined his entire life. When he chooses a path, he does not turn back. That ruthless dedication is what made his enemies fear him long before the first bullet was fired. It was never just about violence, it was about resolve. A man who refuses to stop becomes more dangerous than any weapon. Yet even legends fall. As the war around him expanded, Wick became hunted by the entire assassin underworld. Contracts were placed on his head. Allies turned into enemies. He was shot, stabbed, betrayed, and thrown from impossible heights. Each time the world expected him to finally break. Each time he stood up again, bruised but unbroken. Survival itself had become a habit. And that is the real story behind John Wick. Not the gunfights, not the revenge. The habits, emotional control, discipline, awareness, simplicity, silence, endurance, commitment. These are the invisible systems that created the legend. Because every human life eventually faces its own war. A war against fear, failure, loss, or doubt. The battle always arrives sooner or later. The difference between those who collapse and those who survive is not luck. It is preparation. John Wick did not become unstoppable on the night the war began. He became unstoppable years earlier in the quiet moments when nobody was watching, in the routines, in the discipline, in the habits repeated again and again until they became part of his identity. And that is the real secret behind the legend. Not revenge, habit.